Welcome to the Fi Guys podcast. Today we're going to be talking about cognitive biases. And this is actually a historic two-parter. So if you haven't seen last Monday's episode, don't stop this video quite yet. Keep on watching all the way through. You can pick it up and then go and rewatch episode number 1 of this, which was psychological tricks that are ruining your money and your life. Today, this is the psychological tricks that are costing you your money and your life. With that, let's get started.
Historic podcast. I kind of like that. It's pretty solid. Pretty amazing. So
Pretty amazing.
the first part of this, solid. Usually, I don't know about you, but when I was in college, I would stuff the first half of anything with all the good stuff and the back half would be crap. Okay? That's not what today's podcast is about. We spread it out evenly, so it's all good. All good.
Yep.
Hopefully.
So in the first podcast, we have 25 psychological tricks or mental heuristics or mind shortcuts that we have. In the first podcast, I gave the first 13, and on this podcast, I'm going to give 14 through 25. So we have some more still coming at you, which I'm excited to talk about. And I say we jump right back into it with bias number 14. This is called deprival superreaction tendency. And I understand the names that these psychologists give things make it very, very difficult to understand what's going on. Think about loss aversion. So deprival superreaction tendency is essentially loss aversion. And what that means is that we rather prefer to avoid losing something than we expect the happiness of gaining something. Do you think of something where that might have affected your life or where that can definitely affect you when it comes to your finances?
So loss aversion. God, that's kind of like a mind trick. That's a tough one to describe. Okay.
Here, let me try to explain it to you in a better way. So loss aversion refers to people's tendency to have a strong preference for avoiding losses rather than acquiring gains. So studies show that when someone loses something, it hurts twice as much as a gain. So we can think about this very simply, right? And I've talked about this before. Dominic, if you make a phone call right now and you make this sale, you will get $100. Dominic, if you make this phone call and you don't make this sale, I will take $100 from you.
Yeah. I mean, you can see from my reaction right there. Yeah. I'm just going to cancel my service. I'm going to end my phone. It's not going to snap it in half. Yeah, no, losing $100 it hurts a lot more than gaining $100.
And
yeah, just from my reaction there.
The way that I like to think about these biases, and that I do jujitsu and I teach jujitsu, is once you're able to understand these biases, you're able to use basically mental jujitsu to be able to work on other people if you're trying to make sales. But more importantly, the reason we're going with these biases is because if someone's using mental jujitsu on you in order to separate you from your hard-earned money, we need to be aware of these things so that they're not doing it to us. And more importantly than other people trying to sell to us, we also use mental jujitsu on ourselves. We also, our self-talk is 100% predicated that we have these biases within us. And unfortunately, most people don't even recognize that they have these biases. So if you're unaware that a loss hurts 2 times more than a gain does, you might go through your whole life trying to prevent losses and not thinking about the gains. And I have a quick story about this. So as you know, I'm a financial advisor by trade. I can tell you pretty often, usually once a year, we'll go ahead and I'll have a sit down with my clients and we'll kind of review the portfolio, see what's going on, see if we need to make any changes. So I have these clients that I recently have onboarded about a year ago. So it was time for us to do their meeting. And at the beginning of the meeting, like, hey, Chris, just I've been noticing a lot of movement in my account and it's kind of making me concerned. And I understand that. So we went through and we looked at the whole past year. And over the past year, these clients are up, not to be exactly, but around $200,000 to $300,000 in the last year. And I was like, okay, so what have you been seeing the last few weeks that have been noticing you or been worrying you? And they're like, well, I've noticed that I'm down around $9,000. So I had to point out to them that over the last year, not because of my genius, but really because of what the market does, and it's because we stuck to it, their account is up $300,000. And they're just looking at that like, oh yeah, that's whatever. But the moment they see a paper loss of $9,000, everything kind of goes up in the air. And they're like, well, I can't handle that. I'm fine with the up. That feels okay to me. But the down, I can't accept. So we can definitely see people will start to panic sell when the market starts to do a downturn, because while the market's climbing up, every day you open up your Robinhood app or whatever, you say up 1%, up 2%, you're like, okay, whatever, it's doing its thing. But the moment you open it up and you see down 2%, your heart starts to race. You start to freak out a little bit. Even though it's means absolutely nothing, it's a blip of time in the space of things because we have an aversion to losing things, especially when we feel that we've had them before. And in truth, even your investment, it's still a paper investment until you sell. Until you take your chips to the teller and get your money from the casino, you haven't made anything, you haven't lost it.
It's true. It's true. It's so true. Yeah, I mean, you only lose money when you cash out. So kind of like, how do we flip? Are we trying to more, not necessarily flip the mindset of like not worry so much about the pain, or is that human nature? Or should we focus, you're saying we should focus more on the upside, the positive side. Well, what do you think?
I think it's still human nature. Like we're always going to have loss aversion. There's nothing you can do to get rid of it. It's just ingrained in every single one of us. But I think it's good to be cognizant of it, to say, hey, today market might be down 2%, but yesterday the market was up 2%. And why is my feelings not equal in those two things? When it was up 2%, I just looked at it and went, okay, good.
Yeah.
Now today that it's 2% down, I'm freaking the hell out. And is that right? Is this thought serving me right now? Or is this reaction I'm having right now serving me? Especially if serving you means that I better get out of the market right now because we're down 2%. Because like we all like to say, the way that you make money in the market is you buy low and you sell high. But what do most people do? They buy high and then the market goes down and they freak out and then they sell low. And then they say, I'm done with investing. And then the market has a bull run for 10 years. And after 10 years of it finally doing good, you go, you know what? I can see after 10 years that I was wrong. And you buy in again at the top and it goes right back down. And then you do the exact same thing. And people live their entire lives this way.
Bad way to live. It's not a great way to live. Not a great way to live.
It's a hard way to live. And unfortunately, the stock market's one of the few things that, if we went to Target or something like that, and there was a huge sign over the door that said 50% off all things in the store, there'd be people running into that Target and just like fighting each other to get whatever the hell they can get their hands on.
I could see
but
that.
When the stock market has a downturn, we have a 50% sale on all of stocks. Think about it like this. Tomorrow, Apple was down 50%. Would you think that all of a sudden Apple was gone, like 50% of Apple's shareholder value disappeared? Unless something huge changes overnight, that's not going to happen. And of course, no one knows what the future holds, but I can guarantee you that tomorrow will most likely be better than it is today. And in 10 years, it'll be better than it is today. And no matter what's going on in the world, we all think we're living through history. We all think we're living in the end times. But everyone in all of history has thought they've been living through the end times. And only with hindsight bias are we able to sit there and like basically watch history and be like, oh, it's like a movie. And I know that I'm safe. But when you're actually in it, it doesn't feel like a movie anymore. It feels like you're in the end times. At the end of the day, no matter what's going on in the world, there are still going to be entrepreneurs, going to be people like you and myself, Dominic, other people that want to go out into the world and add value to the world, no matter what's going on. And for that value, they're going to collect money or, whatever it is that shows that they've added value. And then if you own a piece of that person's production, you now get to benefit by their going out there and creating benefit to the world.
Simple as that. Simple as that. I wish it was, I wish the highs were as dramatic and as emotional as the lows. It's kind of unfortunate that they are. Because if they were, then maybe we would be as hungry to get even higher highs.
I don't know. I mean, I try to think of like why evolutionarily do we have this? Like why is this in us? And I think that from this loss aversion, it has also created us to constantly strive for more, to constantly keep on going, to never be 100% satisfied. And that's what made us the dominant apex predator of the world is that drive. But it's also the thing that stops us from ever kind of being okay with what is.
Yeah, 100%. Should we get on to the next one?
Yep. Let's go to bias number 15, social proof tendency. What this basically means is you look to other people for their status, for their group. You look to other people to say, like, what should I do in this situation? And the best way to do that is, let's go ahead and test it. The Fi Guys podcast is the greatest podcast in the world, listened to by over 5 million individuals. That sounds a lot better than the Fi Guys has 6 subscribers. because we look to social proof of if 5 million other people says that the Five Guys is a great podcast, I should definitely listen to it. But if no one else is listening to it, then I probably shouldn't. If no one else is getting value, then why would I be getting value from this? So social proof tendencies shows that we have an automatic tendency to think and act like others around us and the way that they think and act.
And they do this a lot in marketing, I'm correct?
Yes, 100%.
Hugely a lot in marketing. And well, they do it
1000%.
not just in marketing. I mean, obviously they do it in everything, even in like in politics, they do it as well, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Think about when you're maybe going shopping and you're kind of, or, I was recently, when we were in Pittsburgh, we walked around and we walked through one of those little, not flea markets, but like
a farmer's market?
A farmer's market.
Gotcha, yeah.
And, at most booths, there's like nothing going on, right? There's like maybe one person in there. Well, there was one person's booth. It was like a party in there. There was a bunch of people all inside there. And every single person saw that like, hey, everyone's going to that one place. I wonder what they're selling. And everyone's going to that one. And then it starts to create a positive feedback loop. As more people come, more people begin to think like they must be having something that's really special over there. So more foot traffic, more foot traffic, more foot traffic. Think about when you go into like a restaurant, not a restaurant, but like a food court. You're like, I don't know what I want to eat. And you look around and you see that no one's in any line, but there's one line that's like 16 people deep. You're going to be like, that place must have something special, because social proof shows me that if 16 people are in that line, when there's all this other food abundant to them, that place must be good. And we're going to go straight off of that.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. I always feel bad because there's usually like a mom and pop restaurant in the food court and there's like nobody there. And I'm like, oh, man, they're going under.
It's going to be tough.
That sucks. Business is a ruthless sport. It's so ruthless. Yeah.
Yep.
So social proof
the way of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, think about this when it comes to investing, right? If you heard that like, hey, all of us, we're all going to be investing tomorrow in Amazon. And now you're like, well, if everyone else is investing in Amazon, then I should probably invest in Amazon.
Yeah.
And that's really where, in terms of investing, momentum investing gets its holding, in that if things are going up, they tend to stay up. Objects and motions tend to stay in motion. So as the market continues to go up, it's just a story, right? Nvidia is going to go to the moon. Dogecoin is going to go to the moon. Bitcoin's going to go to the moon. Whatever thing you want. It's a story that everyone's jumping into this. I should also jump into this, because if they were wrong, why does that mean?
Yeah, and I think that's the most common thing when investing in the stock market, right? And I'm not talking about like mutual funds. I'm talking about individual stock. Like you're in the trenches trying to outperform the market yourself, because you're so much smarter than the supercomputers that are doing these microtransactions and trading and whatever, I think everybody who's tried to pick individual stocks has fallen into that trap. 100%. Whether that's
100%.
Dogecoin, whether that's GameStop, whether that's AMC, whether it wasn't even that, whether it was a company that your dad told you about, your mom told you about, your best friend told you about. Oh, dude, I got this insider information on this forum on Reddit that it's going to go crazy over the next month. We just got to invest like X, $100, like $10,000. Like everybody's doing it. You should do it too.
Yep. They've done quite a few experiments on this, but there was one experiment where people in New York, they just had a group of people and they would just all stop and stare up at the sky. And if you have one person stopping and just staring at the sky, everyone just passes by that person like that person's crazy and just keeps on walking. But if you get enough people to do it, I think it was only like 10 people, all 10 people staring up in the same direction of the sky, random people would stop and start looking up at the sky to figure out what the hell's going on. And then the more people that do it, the more people start looking up at the sky to figure out what's happening. And we have to think about this evolutionarily, because when it comes down to it, the person that was able to follow the group survived. Yep. And oftentimes, if the group is all looking in one direction, there's a reason for that.
That is so interesting. And I hate that. I don't hate it, but like I dislike that so much, because I'm the curious type and I would 100% would look. I'm like, what are they looking at? What are they looking at?
You would all sit there, and then everyone starts to say like, "Oh, I see it. And even though there's nothing there, that's what we all do.
And I don't know. It's not like a negative. It's not like a bad thing in my brain. It's not like oh man, when I was 6 years old, I was taught curiosity, and it's like, and to follow the crowd's like, no, I'm a human. I'm a curious creature. Like everybody's looking up. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna look at that. But people know that, and they can play that, and it's important, like we're talking about, to recognize it, so that we don't get
Mhm.
fooled, we don't get
Yep.
bamboozled.
And you're going to get fooled. Like it's part of life. I mean,
Mhm.
every time that you watch the Olympics or something like that, they're not saying like, "Hey, right now there's 4 people tuning in." No, they say there are millions of people around the world tuning in because it shows you, and it's very, very subtle. But in your brain automatically makes the connection. If all those people are doing it, then it must be good. It must be the right thing to do. And sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But if you're not aware of that, you could really fall into tendencies. That's the reason that if you watch most commercials, they all will tout how many people they have helped, how many people they have done, how many people they have used their product and has got benefit from it. They're not
Yeah,
saying that if you get the same benefit, but it's a very subtle shift that you said, like, oh, well, if all those people are using it, they must be getting benefit from it. And if I use it, I will also get benefit from
it's true. That social proof is powerful, man. It's
it.
powerful. It's powerful.
It's one of the most powerful ones.
Yeah,
It's
got to be aware of that one. So
Yep.
what do we got for number 16?
Number 16, and I know this is a strange sounding one, but it does make sense. It's contrast misreaction tendency. And what that basically means is that the only way that we understand if something is good or if it's bad is based off of contrast. So this most often, the easiest way for me to explain something to you is let me tell you
Mhm.
a story about a store up in Sedona. And we're here in Arizona. Sedona is about, what, 2 hours away from us, Dominic?
Yeah,
Something
we'll
like
say
that.
2 hours. Yeah, yeah.
So there was a woman who owned a shop in Sedona, and here in Arizona, a lot of people sell those blue rocks. Do you know what the blue rock's called? I can't remember what it was called.
Blue Rock. I've never heard of the
It,
Blue Rocks in Sedona. I've heard of Red
I forget.
Rocks.
I know they sell the red rocks, but they're like a blue. They're like kind of like a jade, but it's not jade.
Okay.
Um, yeah, whatever. A lot of
Yeah.
people sell these blue rocks, and especially in Sedona, it's very, very common. So what she was trying to do was trying to sell these things, and she had kept them on the floor forever and ever and ever, saying that, hey, no one's purchasing these things. So how about we do this? Let's go ahead and take a half of the price off of it. So when she wrote down on her list, take down half price, 1/2, the person saw increase it by 2 times. So they actually doubled the price on it. And then just like that, everyone started buying it because they contrasted when they saw its low price that it must not have any value. But the moment it had a higher price, everyone automatically assumed it must have high value based off contrast principles. And it can also work the opposite way in that if you say, hey, this is typically $100, but today it's only $50, you have contrast that it is now a better deal than it is. That's the reason that during like Black Friday, a bunch of stores, they'll have a bunch, they call them loss leaders. So they know that the TVs are going to sell out. They know that all these things are going to sell out. But what they're going to do is they're going to create a feeding frenzy of everyone running in there to get the quote unquote deals. And they'll go and buy stuff that's normal priced. But since they're thinking about the deals, they'll just buy normal price things too.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So they doubled the value. They doubled the cost to make it feel like it was worth more than it was.
Mm-hmm. And you can do
That's
the opposite too.
or the opposite too. That's crazy. Wow, that's a sneaky. That is very sneaky. Contrast misreaction tendency.
Reaction.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha. Little bit
And
of a
then
little bit
this
of a
this one
mouthful,
goes
but
Yeah, this one goes even deeper too, because
okay.
the only way, and if you go even deeper with it, the only way that we can understand if we're in a good place or a bad place is by contrast, is by looking at other people. So contrast misreaction tendency is very bad when it comes to like social media and people separating their money. Can
Mhm.
you think of a way that that could be an issue?
Separating their money. Mm, give me an. Could you,
Sure. So when I was growing up as a kid, we grew up in a lower middle class neighborhood.
okay.
Everyone around me didn't have a lot of money. We all just thought this is normal because the way I was comparing myself was to every single other person. But in the moment social media came out and I was able to see like, oh, look at all these people. They're all living these great lives. They all have so much money. Well, now I'm comparing myself to them. And now that contrast of the comparison is now creating a reaction into this isn't fair, this isn't right, because I'm no longer comparing myself to other people. Just like when other people were comparing the prices and things, I'm now comparing my life, which is like a lower life, to someone with a higher life. Same way with the sales. And that's how sales work. It's the exact same thing.
Interesting. So basically, by comparing your life to others, you're going to feel a certain way about yourself, is what you're saying with this one.
Yep.
Okay, that's pretty
so
common.
You can either
pretty
compare yourself to people above you or people below you.
Yeah.
And whatever way you decide to do it is going to shade the way that you life. So there's an old Buddhist saying that nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
Well, nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Wow. That's dude, I might have to write that one down. That's a good one. That's a solid one. That should end up on a TikTok somewhere.
And that's contrast at its best. It's, that isn't good, that's not bad, but the way that you compare it to something else is what's going to be the great thing. So if I gave you $100 right now, you'd be really happy.
Yeah.
But then if you found out that I gave your next door neighbor $200 just 5 minutes before, you'd be pretty upset by that because the contrast of I only got half of that for them.
What an interesting concept. I thought you were going to say, yeah, you'd be pretty, I thought you were going to say, and I stole $200 from my neighbor just an hour before. I was like, oh, dirty money you gave me? You're in the crime now, Dom.
Yeah.
You're an accessory to thievery.
You're a part of this now.
Oh, man. Okay. So it's all about how you're looking at things. If you compare yourself to someone who's been doing it for a long time, you're going to feel like crap. If you compare yourself to someone who just started, you're going to feel good about yourself. But really, both are bad in a sense. You want to just
maybe it's often better to evaluate objects and people by themselves and not by their contrasts.
Okay.
So maybe if you're in a store and you're saying like, hey, this thing, or like maybe you've been wanting to buy, I don't know, maybe you haven't even thought about buying something. Maybe you're just in a store and you see a 50% off sale. And for right now, I could buy this pillow for $20. Well, just because there's a contrast that it used to be $40 and now it's $20, do you need the pillow? And if the answer is yes, I want the pillow, then go ahead and buy it. But if you didn't need a pillow, and now we're just using contrast principles on that, this pillow is normally $40, but now it's $20, most people are going to get it because they think they're getting a deal. But if you would look at that pillow and say, I don't want it regardless if it's $20 or $40 because I don't need the fucking pillow, that's what's going to save you from this kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, that happens all the time. Oh, man. Yeah, these are going to keep me out of debt. These are going to keep me out of blowing all my money. I appreciate this.
Hopefully.
You and me both, brother. You and me both. Okay.
I think one of the big things that I've always done with psychology and trying to study the mind is just figuring out when is my thinking off? Because when you get your degree in psychology, like it doesn't really mean much for the world, but it does give you an ability to think about the most important thing, which is your thinking. So you can think about your thinking, which gets very meta, but once you're able to think about your thinking, you're able to notice when you're making mistakes that other people just accept as truth. Because most people, just like that story I told last week of this is water, they believe that whatever their first inclination, their first thought that comes in is, that must be truth. But once you're able to realize that you're tricking yourself with these biases, then you're able to maybe right the ship and say, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. I want to change it. That just because I see something and it's on a sale, I don't need to buy it. Because there is a mental trick going on in my head saying that I need to buy it because it must be more valuable now. And it's funny because it's the opposite in the stock market.
Yep.
When the stock market's at all-time highs, you're contrasting it to when it was lower and saying, wow, it must be a really good deal. But the exact opposite is also true. When the stock market plummets 50%, you're contrasting it to its all-time high and say, wow, I don't want to buy that. It must be doing really poorly. And the stock market is very funny because it's the only thing that's different than if you were to walk into a store. If you walk into a Target, it's the exact opposite contrast.
And do you think that's how the stores have presented the argument, or presented like the framing of it? Or do you think that's just like, it's different because of finance, because there's so much emotional attachment to the money that there is so much more downside than there is upside?
No, I think because at the end of the day, when you buy something from a store, you get to physically leave with something. When you buy a stock, you're buying an idea. You are buying something. You're buying ownership stake in a company.
Yeah.
But you're buying the idea of in the future, this company will be more profitable, bring in more revenue, sell to more people in the future. And you're not leaving with anything. I can't live in my stock portfolio, but I can live in my house.
Yeah.
And then additionally, there's an old saying that at the end of the day, regardless if the stock market goes up or it goes down, when the bell rings, everyone on Wall Street cheers. And you would think they would only cheer when the stock market goes up, right? Because that's how they make money, stock market going up. But in truth, the reason that they cheer is because regardless if the stock market goes down or up, Wall Street makes money because they make money on the buying and the selling. They make money on your trading. So they constantly try to tell you, in order to make money, you have to keep on making changes. And hopefully, if you gain anything from what we've talked about in the last, 50 odd episodes, is that most of the money is made in the waiting, in that boring middle where you're doing absolutely nothing. You have your money invested and you're going hands off and you're enjoying your life.
Yeah, it's true. That's very true. Yeah, I read something recently where it said there's only a study. I don't know how true it is, but it said that about only 8% of people in the world are actually like conscious. Like they see everything, all the decisions they're making, and they like try and like pick it apart. Most people are just going through life. I don't know if I believe 8%. That seems kind of low.
I'd probably say it's lower than that.
Really, you think?
Mm-hmm.
People just going through life, not realizing anything.
Yeah. I can remember a time that was me going through life, just kind of, based off, this is my truth. This is the way I think the world works. And that's the reason that I think, have such a loyal fan base, is because there are people that can kind of wake up and see it. But then that's also the reason that we have a loyal fan base in some, but then other people freak the fuck out with what we say, because they're the people who are going through life kind of in that malaise of, I just exist. And then when there's someone who comes in and challenges that existence, that you can change your life, you can do whatever you want, now their entire identity, everything is now getting shaken up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really scary.
Yeah.
To have everything that you know be kind of torn down. And I've gone through that myself. I've had to tear down everything that I thought I knew and then rebuild it, which is the hardest thing in the world to do.
It is really tough.
So let's move on to bias number 17, if you don't mind.
Okay.
This is stress influence tendency. So we will act faster and get more extreme reactions if our adrenaline is running throughout our body. So some stress is good, but too much is actually bad.
Interesting. Yeah, I could see that. If you're in a Formula One race car going 150, 200 miles an hour and you don't feel any stress, probably something wrong. I know a lot. I was reading sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but
no, go for it.
I remember reading I think it was Extreme Ownership. Jock was talking about when he knew it was time to call it quits, right? And he was saying that he was getting too comfortable. Like he would go out on a mission and he would feel no stress. Bullets would be flying, nothing. And he was saying, like, I started to get complacent. It wasn't stressful anymore. It was getting dangerous. And is that kind of the similar, or am I off?
No, I would say that's an extreme version of this. You've lost that ability. So he's gone so far the opposite way. He's lost that ability to have that. So this is the opposite side of that coin. So you brought up Formula One. I think that's a really great reaction. So recently I was in Japan, right? And we were walking around Japan. And as you walk through Japan, it is extremely crowded, especially if you go through the subway system. It is insane how many people are in there. And if you're walking around, eventually, because you're all walking, sometimes it's kind of like lanes, right? Like everyone's just walking. And sometimes people will cut in front of you and you have to like kind of do a stutter step and like to let them go in front of you because they're trying to get to their place. And in that situation, no one freaks out. You stepped in front of me, I just take a stutter step. It's okay. But in a car, the exact same thing happens. Every single one of us, our adrenaline, even though you don't notice it because you're so used to it, is up when you're in a car. When you're going 60 miles an hour in basically a can of soda or in a freaking tin can, you don't realize it, but your whole autonomic nervous system is freaking out because this is not natural to the thousands of years that human beings have been alive. We have never been able to do this. So if someone pulls in front of us inside of a car, what do? We all freak the fuck out because in our brain, we have adrenaline coursing through our minds. That's why if someone steps in front of me when I'm walking, No issue. There, I was not at risk. But someone does it to me when I'm in a car, I lose my freaking mind because this stress influence tendency. You look shocked out of your mind.
Oh my gosh, dude. That is unbelievable. That's so true. It's so true. Someone cuts in front of you, do a little stutter step, no big problem, no issue. But when you're in a car, it's like the end of the world. You get mad. Like, what's this guy's deal? What's his problem? No blinker? That's crazy. And it has to do with the adrenaline.
So during crisis, people often make quick decisions and those quick decisions are influenced by higher emotional resonance. The emotions are triggered by your body's reaction. So already have a higher adrenaline. So we can think about this, that stock market starts to go down, right? Maybe it's 10, 15, 20%. And now people start to stress out. You're stressed out. Your adrenaline's starting to go. You're watching your life energy, all of your money disappear. And now you start to make bad decisions. And not only bad decisions when it comes to your money by maybe selling out, but also people start making bad decisions in life too. Maybe they start driving more recklessly. They start, treating their family worse. All of these things are influenced to one another.
It's interesting how everything is tied in like that. It's just a
Yeah,
massive chain
everything is
reaction.
tied in.
Yeah. That's crazy. That might be my favorite one so far.
Yeah, it's probably just the story I told.
It
about
was
it, but yes.
a really good story. I love a good story. Yeah, Chris has been adding more stories into the podcast. I don't know if you guys have been noticing it, but I've been loving it. I've been freaking loving it.
Good.
The person cutting in front of you, but like, oh my, that is just like, you painted a picture. I'm sold. Like, That's crazy. So
and I think the crazier thing is about that whole thing, like someone stepping in front of you and changing it, is automatically, and this has nothing to do with the biases, but I just want to talk about it. So when someone cuts in front of you, you create a narrative in your head. You create a story. You tell the story that this person cut in front of me because they don't care about me and they don't care about their life and they put me and my own life at risk. But in truth, that person could have a kid in the back seat who cracked their head open, is bleeding out, and they're trying to get to the hospital.
Yeah.
And in reality, if that is the story, you're in that person's way.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that that's true.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's true. That person who drives that big truck, cuts in front of you, probably is an asshole. But you also don't know that it's not true. So sometimes it's important to check your biases, check the story you're telling yourself. And most importantly, if you're getting value from this thus far, please subscribe to the channel. And do it right now, under stress.
There we go. That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. What other ones can we use for this one? I'm trying to figure out how we can use the contrast one, but I'm like,
yeah,
the price of a subscriber just went down, so it's a great value to subscribe right now. Everybody's doing it.
Everyone else is subscribed, and you should definitely subscribe and leave a comment because everyone else is doing it. Hashtag social proof.
Hashtag social proof. Exactly. And
you want to talk anything more about stress influence?
No, that's stress. No, I'm good on that. Tendency? That's smart. It's again. I swear we've been like on like a 3 podcast thing talking about framing and how you see different things in life.
Mm-hmm.
It's like because if I if my dog's dying and I need to get him to the vet, I will cut off every single person in traffic to get that done. Right? They don't know that.
Yep.
But, it's like how they see it's like, wow, this guy's great. We live in a crazy society. This guy's a maniac. This guy's, he's a felon. He's a criminal. This guy's driving all over the road like a maniac. And it's like, no. I'm a good human being who loves his animal. And I'm just trying to save his life. It's like, wow. The 2 different movies here. It's two different movies. It's all about how you frame it.
I think the big thing is that we are always the hero of our own story.
Mm-hmm.
And we can always justify our actions, but we can't justify other people's actions because in truth, and yourself, Dominic, listener, you can think about this. You don't know what I'm thinking until I say it, but you know automatically what you're thinking. You are the only thing in your world that is real because you can only feel your feelings. You can only have your experiences, your body, your touch, your mind. Everything else could be an illusion for all that you know. And the only way that you know that it's not an illusion or that you have the sense that it's not an illusion is that other people tell you their feelings, what they're experiencing and stuff like that. But even in truth, you don't really know that. Only thing you can know is that you're real, that you exist. Because you think, therefore you are.
There you go. You think, therefore you are.
Getting philosophical.
I love it.
Now we are.
I love it. More. I love it. So what are we? Are we on 17 or we're going on to 18?
That was 17.
That was
We're going to
17?
18 right now.
All right, let's do it.
Yep. So this is called availability misweighting tendency.
Okay.
So we typically overweight things that are easily accessible. And the best way for me to explain this to you is think about when you're driving home from a long day of work and you're like, okay, I'm gonna have to go. I can swing into the store, I can grab some healthy food, I'll get home and I'll make it real quick. Or I can swing into McDonald's and get food and it's real fast. Availability misweighting tendency comes into whatever is easiest and most accessible is what human beings will often do.
Interesting. In order to get around that, is it a planning aspect or is it just don't be lazy and go for the fast and
No,
easy?
I mean it's both things. It's both a planning and a don't be lazy. But let's think about this. So if I wanted to use this to my advantage and I'm trying to maybe get really healthy, and I know at the end of every day, and you just think about it for yourself, at the end of every day when I get home, I do not want to cook dinner. Like I don't want to work. No one wants to work. And it's so much easier to swing into McDonald's. But I also know that if I put in some work at the beginning of the week, maybe on a Sunday, and I meal prep all of my dinners, now the decision for availability misweighting tendency of what's easier, is it easier for me to take 5 minutes to stop into McDonald's, or is it easier for me just to go home, take the food out of my fridge that I already made, put it in the microwave for a minute and have it done?
It's true.
We as human beings are always going to go to what is most easy. And the reason for that evolutionarily is that doing anything, making any change, walking up and down the stairs, thinking takes cognitive load, and that cognitive load takes energy. The one thing that we all have too much of for the first time in history is too much energy. That's why there's fat people all over the freaking place, because we have too much energy. But our body doesn't know that. So our body is constantly trying to conserve energy any way that it can by making easy decisions. The hardest thing that your body has to do outside of working and running is thinking. Your brain eats up, I think it's something like 60% of your body's energy.
Interesting. And for stupid people, it's like 30%? How does that work?
I have no idea. I don't think that's accurate.
That's not how that works? I don't know. I always thought that's how that works. Okay.
But I think when I think about like the availability misweighting tendency, that we're often going to go to what's easiest and most available. If we move outside of fast food, move outside the physical world, if I challenge someone's idea and say like, hey, here's a new way of thinking about this, what's going to be easier, to accept that my idea may be wrong, or to just say, no, you are wrong and my idea is correct? What's going to be easier calorically on the brain?
Oh,
To have to rethink all of your thoughts and the things you have around that, or just to be like, nope, you're wrong, fuck you, go away, I'm done.
yeah. I mean, it's just easier just sitting with, no, you're wrong, I'm right. Done deal.
Yep.
So much easier. Like I'm done. Like that's it.
So that's it. So think about that in your own life, and in times where you feel like you're being attacked, or when someone brings something against you. That's the beautiful thing about a debate. When you debate with somebody, and when you go like to a debate team, you don't know what side of the argument you're on till you're in there. And regardless of what side you're on, if you're on the opposing or the for side, you're going to be just fine. But once you start to realize that no matter which way you're looking at it, you just start to make it whatever's going to be easier for you. And you just don't want to change it. Until you can understand both sides of the argument, it's going to be really hard to win most arguments.
Interesting. Yeah, were you ever in a debate club or debate team or anything like that?
No, I was just very lucky that I had a really good friend in high school who just loved to debate. Like no matter what it was, he would take the opposite argument. If I was like, "Hey man, we should go this way," he'd be like, "No, I want to go that way," and it was very annoying at the time. But now that has developed into me too. So now whenever someone says something, I will take the counter argument, even if I agree with you.
Yeah.
I'll take the counter argument because I want to. The only thing that matters to me is finding truth and what actually works. And the only way to find truth is whatever you think is right. I'm going to take the opposite extreme because the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. And if we're both just being yes men and going like, yep, let's go that direction, we're not going to see any other possibility.
It's true. That's true. I think it's important to surround yourself with people who don't share the same viewpoints as you, but who can take the opposition that you bring to the table. But also it's important to challenge your own ideas so that you're not always like, no, this is what I think. This is what I think. Just reinforcing. I always love that Bruce Lee quote. It's like, be like water, be formless. You put water in a cup, becomes a cup. You put it in a glass, becomes a glass. You put it in a kettle, becomes the kettle, right? Be formless, be shapeless, always be moving. I always love that.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's so important too, especially in like this world of like our political climate. Like if you're a super right wing Republican and all you watch is Newsmax and Fox News, and everyone's just you're just only hearing what you want to hear. But also it goes to the opposite side. If you're super liberal and all you watch is I don't know what would that be
CNN.
MSNBC
Yeah.
maybe and like CNN, you only watch those two news stations, then you're also finding the same thing. What you should be doing is trying to find as much contrasting ideas as you possibly can. And while that may seem not fun, it definitely isn't fun when I believe something and someone challenges me on it. But the more and more you do it, the more and more you realize that you don't know jack shit about the world. Even if you think you're the smartest person, the more that you find out that you don't know, the more that you realize, like, as the ocean of my knowledge grows, so does the shore of my ignorance. So as I learn more, I realize how much I don't know.
God, isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth?
And once you're able to realize how much you don't know, you're able to more easily, when someone challenges your idea, be like, you know what, you might be right. I don't think you're right now, but let's hear you out. And once you're able to hear someone out, you're able to come to more of a balanced view. Or maybe at the end of the day, you can still say, no, I think you're wrong, but at least you're able to hear somebody out. And this is what too many people are doing. They're all trying to shout at each other saying that you're wrong. And that's not a way to move anyone towards where you want them to be.
Interesting. That's very interesting. What was the title for that one?
Availability, misweighting tendency. So whatever is most easily available, we would do. It's available, it's easier. We misweight that as it must be the right thing to do. And then I kind of moved into a different realm with the whole political thing, but
I don't remember.
It's the same thing. That's also the same bias that's being acted on.
What's that book? I know we both read it. It has to do with habits and like habit stacking, and I don't know if it was
Atomic Habits.
Atomic. Thank you. That's what it was. Yeah, I was trying to think of like which one it was, because he talks a little bit about that in that book, about how like if you want to make a habit easier, if you want to make a habit stick, you make it easier, and if you want to make a habit disappear, make it harder.
Mm-hmm.
And I always like that. I always like that.
So I was watching a thing about, like, I think it was The Real World or one of just whatever, any of those like trash TV shows. So what they do with those trash TV shows is they put all of the food, all the pantry food, they put it up on the higher shelves, and they put all of the liquor and the alcohol on eye level shelves, with the knowledge that people are going to go for what's easiest. So that's why they're trying to create trash TV. They're trying to create drama. So they just put alcohol all at normal level, and people are going for it. And that's what they do. But it's the opposite way in bars, right? In bars, you try to put your best stuff at the top in order to create contrast, in that this is better than everything else. So I want that stuff up there, because you're not the one who's reaching for it. Someone else is going to reach for it.
Okay, interesting. How do you know so much about trash TV? That's what I want to know.
My wife watches only trash TV.
I love it. Yeah.
And I happen to be there,
Dude.
or I happen to walk by and be like, what's, I hate it that like she'll watch trash TV and I'll be like, I don't want to watch this. This is garbage. But, and every single man who has or every single guy that has like someone in their life that watches trash TV can admit that they're like, I don't want to watch this. This is stupid. But the more and more you walk by, the more and more you just keeps on. It's like watching a train wreck, and you have to watch that train wreck. And then eventually you're like, so what did she do to him? And why is he mad at her? And then eventually she'll pause it. This is what happened here, blah, 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 blah. And then eventually, like 2 episodes later, you're sitting there on the couch with her being like, that bitch, I can't believe she did that. That's how they catch you.
That's awesome. It's so true, though. It's so true. Like, man, I don't know what they're doing in that show that just draws us in, but man, it is infectious.
Well, we've talked about a lot of it, of what they're doing. And remember, like every single show, they always end on like a really good cliffhanger, yep. Which we talked about, of one of the cognitive biases of asking questions in cognitive biases, part 1. So like they're using a bunch of these tendencies all together in order to get people hooked. And on the last tendency, you're going to understand how we can use all of these together to really get to where we want to go. But I want to move on to bias number 19. Okay. This is called, it's very simple, the use it or lose it tendency. And what this means is if you don't use it, you lose it. So in terms of our skills, we want to constantly keep our good skills fresh and foremost by using them every single day. So I think we can all think back to when we were kids, right? And we had a test the next day. And of course we didn't study because we're kids. So the day before, we just crammed super freaking hard. We're trying to retain as much information as I possibly can. And maybe you were good at cramming, maybe you were bad at cramming, but you crammed really hard. You did your test. As soon as that test was over, you automatically lost all the information. It's gone.
It's pretty
But if
accurate.
you're able to take things like say physicists, the best physicists in the world are people that are able to see physics in every single day object, in every day. And they're able to say like, oh, hey, I know that physics. I know what's happening here. And they're thinking about it constantly. Same thing with me and finances. The reason I think I'm so good at finances is because I'm constantly interacting with it. It's part of my job.
Mhm.
Like it's part of my job with clients, but it's also what I do every single day. I think about these things. So it makes me even better at money than other people. We can even think about a language. If you work so hard to attain a language, maybe Spanish, maybe, I don't know, whatever your language that you want
Yeah,
to attend is, if you don't use it, it goes away. But if you try to use it just a little bit every day, that language stays with you.
it's true. It's true. Use it or lose it. I guess that goes for your brain too. If you don't use it, you don't exercise it, and muscles. It goes for everything really. You don't use it, you're gonna lose it. If you don't train your brain, you don't, keep trying to challenge it. It's like you would challenge a muscle at the gym. It's gonna get weaker and deteriorate. Gotta use it or you lose it.
Yeah, and I know this is going to get a little weird, but there's a way that I like to think about this when it comes to my money.
Okay.
If I try to be the person that, and this is a newer thought, but so work with me on it. If I'm the person that always thinks that, if I use my money, I'm going to lose my money. I have to retain all my money. I can't spend any of my money. Then I start to look at money as if it's finite. There's only a certain amount of money in the world. And if I'm only focused on retaining money, not spending any money, less money is going to come into my life because I'm not looking at it as an infinite resource that it is. So maybe sometimes we have to use our money in order to not lose our money. Kind of like that, in order to make money, you have to spend money 1st,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't true in all aspects, but it is kind of true in that if you want money to go into your life to flow like a river, it could be like water. We have to also be willing to spend money and to show ourselves and our brains that money is abundant. Because if money is abundant, then we're willing to maybe take risks that we wouldn't be able to do if we thought that money was scarce.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. It's kind of like I don't know. The way I see it is like money is energy, and if you give your energy out, your energy will come back. In a sense.
Yep. I think that's a great way of putting it. And I've always said that what is money? It's a representation of our time and the time and effort we put into things. So the reason money feels so icky and feels so bad is because you trade your life energy, your time, the only one non-renewable resource that we all have, for money. And if you're someone who feels that I have to hoard that, you're not putting it out, and it's not being like energy. The way that you're going to get is by giving, right? I can't walk up to just random people and say, give me $10, give me $10, give me $10. But if I'm willing to give them $5, $6, we can also use the reciprocity principle, and I know that I can get more back in the future. So it's that exchange of energy. And if I dam my energy up, and I feel like we're moving down like a manifestation rabbit hole, which I'm not trying to get to,
Okay.
but it is almost, it kind of, I can see the parallel that someone could make there, that it's kind of sounds like, oh, it's just manifesting. But it's not just manifesting. I'm not just putting something on a vision board and now I'm going to have it. I'm putting it on the vision board in order to turn myself into the person that is deserving of it, therefore attaining it.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Again, we do it live.
We're doing it live. Yeah, no,
I
I love a good thought. I love a good thought. Yeah, honestly, like, I think manifestation without any work involved is just dreaming,
Yep.
And in regards to like the use it or lose it, I don't know how I'm going to tie this one in. Sit tight. In regards to the use it or lose it and manifestation, I don't know how to put this. You can only become something that you want to be if you work towards it. But if you never work towards it, you're just dreaming. And in regards to like use it or lose it, it just doesn't I don't know. How do you feel about use it or lose it? I'm on the fence because like, if you don't ever use your money, you just save it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then it's pointless. It meant nothing anyway. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this.
Maybe we don't have to. I think the thought you're having is a good thought. I don't know if it's really linked that well to use it or lose it tendencies.
No, I don't think so.
Just know that is a tendency that people have in their brains because our brain is finite. Not finite. Our brain is infinite, but we only have so much storage capacity that is readily available. And if you're using something every day, then it's going to be. Again, think about evolution. What is the reason that you need to keep something that is taking a bunch of energy to retain in your brain. It's easier just to wipe that stuff away.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you can't tell me like, hey, what was in your left pocket yesterday? I have no fucking idea, because your brain got rid of it. That doesn't matter. That means nothing to you today.
Yeah. Simple as that.
But yeah, I really like the thing you're saying about the manifesting thing. And like, just because you manifest it doesn't mean that you don't have to put in, you still have to put in the time and the effort.
Yep.
You know, and I think a lot of people, they look at that and they're like, oh, well, if I put in hard work, or if I put in my time and my effort, then I should be rewarded for that. But you have to remember that we live in the real world. In the real world, there are people who are putting in time and the utmost effort and all of their skill they have towards something. And in this world, that's the way the world, they're going to win. I don't know if they're going to win immediately, but on a long enough time scale, the person that puts in more time, more effort is going to win.
Bingo. Bingo. Simple as that. Simple as that.
So this is bias number 20. It doesn't really relate super well to finance, but it is a good bias that we should all be aware that we have in us. And that is drug misinfluence tendency. So all human beings are prone to using drugs and getting addicted to them, whether that be alcohol, caffeine, cigars, cocaine, or any mind-altering drugs that we have. It's an extremely strong tendency that we all have that costs us lives. So we need to be aware of that we all have the tendency to become addicted to something that may not be the best for us. I'm not saying that caffeine isn't always good for you. I'm not saying it's always bad for you. I know that there's always people that say like, no, caffeine's good for you. I read a study back in 1990s,
Mm-hmm.
but it also could be a detriment to you.
Mm-hmm.
So just be aware that all human beings have this tendency.
Yeah. Just like healthy cocaine doesn't exist. Exist.
Healthy cocaine.
Healthy cocaine. Very popular in the 90s.
Coke.
Not as healthy anymore. Not as healthy.
Yeah, clean Coke.
Clean Coke. New Coke.
New Coke. But we can definitely think about this like it's a bias that people unfortunately have used to other people in order to get them to do what they want. People use it all the time, and I don't want to go here, but I'm going to. For people that get human trafficked, often the way that they start it is they get them hooked on drugs, and then they're able to more easily manipulate them because now they're hooked on a drug. And you can even think about yourself. Maybe you're not hooked on drugs. Maybe you're just a caffeine addict. Do you want to go through your entire life not being able to function without 3 shots of espresso? Because now if you're like that, companies know that they have created this in people, and now they can raise their prices up ever so quickly or ever so slowly. And no matter what, you're now addicted to the caffeine. You're addicted to the alcohol. You're addicted to the cigarettes. And you're going to separate from your hard-earned money in order to get that. Think about a cocaine addict or a crack or whatever, a heroin addict. All they do every morning is they wake up thinking about how am I going to get more drugs today. They're not living a good life because that's the only thing that matters to them.
I'm going to go in 2 directions here.
Love it.
Because like, oh crap, here we go. Get the editing out. First one, okay. I'm gonna say the first one because it's funny to me. Someone who's addicted to like crack, they're never like, oh man, I don't have money for crack. They go out and they hustle and they get the money. So it's like, are you lazier than a crack addict? It's like, I have no money. I'm poor. It's like the guy down the street, he's hustling. He knows his objective. Clear cut objective. Clear time frame.
I have a quick story to tell you. It's really
Let's
fun.
do it.
Okay, so I was listening to a podcast, and there was this podcast, and this cop came on who was from Detroit, and he was telling like, what's the craziest things that you ever experienced in your life? And this guy is no longer a cop anymore. He's now an entrepreneur, and he was saying like, what was the thing that like caused you to decide like, I don't want to be a cop anymore, I want to be an entrepreneur? And he said the craziest story ever happened. And he told about this guy that every single day, this guy would go out, hustle, make money, do crack, and then fall asleep in the park. And they all knew him as like Crack Kenny. Like Crack Kenny was in the park chilling. And they would constantly pick Kenny up and have to take him in. He'd get booked, and then eventually they release him, and that's just kind of the cycle. But one day Kenny was like lucid enough to ask like, Kenny, how much money do you spend a day on crack? And he's like, oh, like $800. So this guy thought to himself, this guy wakes up every morning on a bench with nothing to his name. The only thought in his head is, I need to go and get crack. and he will do anything to make $800 a day in order to buy crack, in order to start the same day process over again. And then the cop had the realization that Kenny makes more money than he does being a crack addict than the guy was doing as a police officer. Now, I'm not saying that Kenny wasn't doing awful things to make $800, but the fact of the matter still remains that Kenny was waking up every single day with the hustle mentality of, I need to make $800 in order to get my crack, to be able to fall asleep and start the process over again. So at that point, the guy realized it was a mindset shift that he needed, not a mindset shift to go get crack, but a mindset shift to hustle every single day to make more money, to put in that effort the same way that Kenny did, obviously in a very different way than Kenny probably did to get that $800. Hopefully. I don't know what Kenny was doing.
Dude, 800,
doing
800 to get it that day is crazy work.
Hold on. What's 800 times 365?
That's a lot of damn. It's got to be over $1 million.
He was making like $300,000 a year.
Dude, whoever says crime doesn't pay never met Crack Kenny. That's crazy. Dude, that's crazy.
And obviously it's a story. Maybe there's some days that he makes $800 and gets it. Maybe there's some days he only makes $100 and only gets a little bit of crack. But like, either way, this guy was waking up every day and making more money than the average person does who sits on their couch bitching about the way the world is.
That's so unfair.
Kenny doesn't care if the world is against him. Kenny just wants crack.
Yeah. Dude,
that's all that matters.
That kind of pisses me off because I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, dude, $300,000 a year, you could have a nice house, steak dinner every night, and still have enough money left over to go do crack. And wake up in a park if you want.
just a little bit of crack.
Kenny, I don't know, your financial advisor. Just cut back on the crack. Let's invest into something a little bit more long term, and you'll see. That's crazy.
It's crazy, right? So I have another quick story. I know you have a second point to me.
No. I got nothing. Well, just do your point. We'll go to the next one.
Yeah, it's gone. So when my friend, one of my best friends, he went to Humboldt State for college, which is in the Golden Triangle of, not the Bermuda Triangle, the Golden Triangle of Northern California. This is where all the weed pretty much in the world historically used to be grown, was in the Golden Triangle, which was basically Humboldt State and like to up where the Redwoods is. It's like just this perfect area for growing weed. So obviously, if you live there, a lot of people that grew up there got addicted to drugs because like you are into like the drug mecca of the world. So me and my friends went to go visit our friend who was up there for college. And one day we were going to go to town to get food. And one of my other friends, he didn't have a lot of money, but he had a jar full of coins that he wanted to go and find a Coinstar at the time in order to convert the coins into money. And we could buy food because he wasn't going to like show up at like a Wendy's and be like, here's a jar of pennies. But so we went to go do it. So we're walking through downtown Humboldt, and I'll tell you the city is Humboldt. And there was like crack addicts all over the place, and like it's crazy. And my dumb friend is walking around with this jar full of change, and I'm like, put that under your shirt. You're gonna get robbed, and like I don't want to get stabbed over your stupid jar of money. And so eventually he put it under his shirt, but someone noticed that he had a jar of money, and he's like, hey man, let me get some of that money. And my friend was like, I'm not going to give you any of my money, but like, if you want, you could come with us and I'll buy you some food, because he felt bad. And the guy goes, he says like, motherfucker, I don't want food. I need money to buy crack. And then I just thought of like that's Kenny. Like, he doesn't care. Like, he just wants crack. That's all that he cares about.
Dude.
And he's down to hustle for whatever he needs to do.
Awesome. Now the takeaway from this is we need to learn. I don't care how many podcasts it takes. We need to learn how to have that level of one-track mindedness. Well, focused goal, that ruthless, that hungry. Dude, I wish I was as hungry as Crack Kenny minus the crack. I really do.
You know, I don't think that's the way that we want to go through life, right? Because none of us are single-minded. And like the worst thing could do is that we get so single-minded on a goal and realize that we are heading towards the wrong goal. Like, let's use Kenny as the example. Kenny is one-track minded on getting crack. And like, while that all sounds well and good that he has a one-track mind, he's heading towards the wrong goal. I would say that like no one knows what the right goal is. I think the right goal is to live a good balanced life. In order to live a good balanced life, we can't be hyper-focused on one thing. If you're hyper-focused on, I need to live a good balanced life, you're never going to live.
No. So the best thing we can do is just live for today and try and forget about how ruthless Cocaine Kenny or Crack Kenny, Cocaine Kenny, how ruthless he really was.
But it's also a balance, right? Because you can't live just for today. You also have to plan for tomorrow. So again, it's hard. I'm not saying none of this is easy. But
Kenny never realized that. He didn't know about that.
Kenny,
He didn't know about that. He didn't know about that.
Yeah, but drug misinfluence tendencies, it's really, really big. Like, just be aware that if you're addicted to something, anything you're addicted to, the prices can rise on you. But you can also use that addiction to, I guess, drive yourself to financial freedom. I wouldn't recommend it, but at least know that that's in your brain. That is a possibility.
Good Lord. Good Lord. All right, what's the next? Let's go to 20.
Let's get on to bias
22.
number 21. It's 21.
21.
Consensus misinfluence tendency. I know, big dumb word, but basically what it means is as we age, we naturally lose certain skills and abilities. So just like you talked about earlier, if you don't use your brain, you lose your brain. So we need to constantly be aware of these things, because the less that we're trying, and I guess this one and the user to lose it tendency do kind of work hand in hand. But as we get older, we lose neuroplasticity. And as that neuroplasticity starts to do, we start to slow, we start to decay from our learning, from physically. All these things are a part of us. So we all need to be aware of that there is a peak time in your life that you are physically the best, but that doesn't always mean that it's all downhill from a certain time. You can always get smarter. That's why, like, you meet like a 90-year-old, like really smart person who's like still with it. Again, they're not common, but when you do meet them, they're pretty astounding to talk to. Just like how quick-witted they are and how much knowledge they have in their brain.
Yeah, they just never stop learning, never stop challenging themselves. Beautiful. It's beautiful. It's inspiring to see, really.
Yep. So I don't think. Do you have anything you want to talk about on that
dude,
one?
I'm still thinking.
I'm not even
Cocaine Kenny, honestly.
Crack
Yeah,
Kenny.
Crack Kenny.
I'm not gonna
go for it.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of when it comes to a money thing like this is maybe if you're someone who works with your body, like because I think like mind things, like us podcasting, we can podcast to our 80s, given that we can still speak. But like if you're someone who depends on your body, like maybe if you're an NFL athlete, or maybe you're like a mechanic or something like that, where it's hard on the body, a soldier, you have to realize that over time, your body will decay. And if your only way of making money is dependent on your body's ability to do things, you also need to be able to plan for the future, for the day that your body can't keep up with what you need. We see it a lot with NFL players. They make millions of dollars after signing, and they spend millions of dollars, but their life in NFL football, I think the average NFL football player makes it for 2 seasons.
Yeah, it's true. And you got to make that money last.
Mm-hmm.
Never works.
All right. Bias number 22.
Right.
This one is a big one.
Right.
Authority misinfluence tendency. So we tend to follow the orators of those with higher authority than us just because they say so.
So is that in regard to like political figures, or is that like mom and pop, or like, well, what are we dealing with here?
Yes and yes.
Yeah.
Yes and yes. We can think a lot about. You ever heard of the Milgram experiment?
No.
It's okay. I'll tell you about it.
Okay. Google it, guys. Okay.
Sorry, I know that most people listen on the podcast, but the moment I asked that, or if you go to the YouTube video, you see Dominic's face like, why are you asking me questions that I don't know the answer to?
That's really funny though.
So in the Milgram experiment, it was a test that was done to see how far someone of authority can push somebody else. So in this subject, or in this story, what they ended up doing is they ended up bringing in the researcher and then a lab assistant, and then 2 people. And then they basically flipped tails. One person was going to be the lab assistant. The other person was going to be the one getting the experiment done on them. And the person that was actually brought in didn't know that one of the person was a proxy. So no matter what happened, the person who was brought into the experiment was always going to be the lab assistant. They were never going to be the one getting the experiment done to them. So what ends up happening is the person, heads or tails, the person that wins gets to be the lab assistant and gets to deliver the shock. The person who loses, heads or tails, has to sit inside of a chair and get shocked. So the way that they ran this experiment is they had the person on the other side of a wall, and the person says like, hey, just so you guys know, like the lab person would say like, just so you know, you're going to be getting shocks that are going to be delivered to you. None of it is going to be, it's going to be painful, but it's not going to be life-threatening. And the person says, well, just so you know, I have a pacemaker, but if it's going to be fine, we can go for it. So the experiment begins. So the person says, hey, we're going to do 10 volts. I'm going to ask you a question. If you get the question right, we don't shock you. If you get the question wrong, we shock you. So the experimenter would ask the question, the person would always get it wrong, and then they would tell the lab assistant, who was the person who was brought into the experiment, to test if they would do it, or deliver 10 shots. They press the button, the person goes, ow, that hurt. And they go, okay, we're increasing it to 20 volts. And they continue this experiment over and over and over again. 20 volts becomes 40 volts, 40 volts becomes 80 volts, 80 becomes 160. Eventually we're up to like, 300 volts. And this is where we start to get to the point where the person on the other side of the wall is saying like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, this is fucked up. Like, I have a pacemaker, you have to stop. And even the person who's getting experimented on, the person who's trying to see how far will you take this, is being like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. But the person with authority, the person with the lab coat, with the clipboard, is saying, you must press this button. And unfortunately, most of us, if you put yourself in that situation, would say, I would stop pressing the button the moment that person told me to stop pressing the button. But in truth, 82% of the people took it to the point where the person was dead. So what makes you think you're in the 18%?
It just goes to show that we're all sheep.
If there is someone who has authority over us, or we perceive authority, yes. And if we take this, again, evolutionarily, I always like to look back at evolution. The person who was the strongest, who was the toughest, the person that we followed them for a reason. And if they told us to do things, we did it for a reason because it kept us alive.
Yeah.
And to take this to a darker realm, we can think about this when it comes to World War II and the Nazis. Yep. There were a lot of German people who were not full-on Nazis, who did not know what was happening, but they went along with it anyways because they were told to and they had to. There were a lot of German soldiers that killed themselves after the war because of the things they did. And there's also another way of looking at this. Most people will put themselves in the place of the person getting experimented on, the person who has to press the button. But that also means that there's another person who has to tell somebody to do something that they may not want to do either. So both people may be trapped in this situation.
Absolutely.
Both you're trapped as the person being told what to do by the figure, but you may also be trapped as the figure that has to tell people to do something that you don't want them to do.
That's very interesting.
But there's incentives that are pushing down on you. So,
and do we see this?
Authority.
Do we see this pretty often in everyday society?
Yes.
Could you give me an example? I mean, maybe not like every day, but like one like when it happened. Besides like Hitler and the Nazis,
we can see it in marketing today. Okay. When you think about like someone with high authority. If I told you about the story with like Ludanian Tomlinson, right? Last time with the AstroTurf.
Yes.
So, okay, I have a good one.
Okay.
So there was a medical doctor, and I can't remember what his name was. He wasn't even a medical doctor. He was an actor that played a medical doctor on like Grey's Anatomy or something. Maybe it was even an older show for like baby boomers. And when they came out with some eventual drug that they wanted to sell, they didn't bring in a real doctor to talk about the drug. They brought in this actor who played a doctor because people remember him as having influence as a doctor on a show. And then that whatever drug they were selling, I can't remember what it was, sold like gangbusters because people were associating this person who had authority, even if the authority wasn't real, in a subject in order to sell things. So this happens all the time. Watch most commercials. Why do you think that if you watch daytime TV commercials, you have random ass people who like, obviously we don't know who they are, but like
that's
let's do it for something reasonable. So Taylor Swift. I don't think Taylor Swift endorses many things, but many people in our generation adore Taylor Swift. If Taylor Swift came out as an authority figure and said, I want you guys to follow this person, everyone does it.
Yep.
That's the same reason that so many companies work with influencers, because they have authority over the people that listen to them. Same with us here on the Fi Guys. People that listen to us every single week, we have authority over them. If we were to say something, hey, I want you guys to trust this person. Watch or take out a thing with Monarch Money. You guys should go to Bank of America for this or whatever. I'm not saying do any of those things. But if you get that influence, that authority, people will listen to you just because you have authority over them.
Wow. Okay. No, that Taylor Swift one is a great analogy. That's a great, very real world.
Yep.
It's kind of scary though.
Well, human society was formed and organized on dominance hierarchies. Like that's the way that we've all been led to believe, is that we've all built on dominance. And dominance doesn't mean that you're the strongest person. Dominance just means that you're the leader. And oftentimes I think a lot of people, they think that the leader is the strongest person. He's the baboon that's fucking other baboons up, and he's the strongest one. But in truth, the dominant one is the one who is smarter than everyone else, who has his enforcer, has his smart guy. Because if you watch monkeys, You think that the strong one is be the one who wins. Eventually, 5 or 6 smaller monkeys will decide, I'm tired of this, and they'll murder that monkey. They'll murder the
Monkey.
and that's how it happens. So the strong leaders, the ones that survive, are the ones who realize that it's a balance.
That's wild. That's kind of wild. Okay, so that's authority.
Actually, I have one more story.
Okay.
Sorry. So I met this guy who was a pilot in the Marine Corps. And after he left the Marine Corps, he became a normal pilot, and he owned his own. He actually created his own, like, he's like a commercial pilot now. And then he created his own little, like, private pilot transport thing.
Yeah.
And one day he was interviewing somebody, and somebody came in who was actually a commanding officer. He didn't work for him, but when they talked, that they were both military. My friend was the interviewer, and he asked the guy, like, his previous work experience, and he said, like, oh, hey, like, I used to be in the military. And he asked, like, oh, well, what level were you? And come to find out, the guy doing the interview, the guy who was being interviewed, was actually a higher rank than this guy was when they were in the military. And the moment that happened, the person who was being interviewed automatically thought, like, I'm better now, and, like, I can now lead this interview. So my friend had to, like, stop the interview and be like, hey, when we were in the military, you may have been the commanding officer, but now that doesn't mean jack shit right here, right now. And you need to remember that I'm still in charge here. Because that person who was being interviewed automatically came into this tendency, this authority misinfluence tendency, and thinking that he was now above, because at one point in his life, he would have been above. That's how this thing didn't affect somebody else, but fucked with his own brain, causing him to lose a job because this tendency came into him.
Okay. How weird. That's kind of sad.
This is how the brain works. And if you're unaware of it, you know, because all that happened was him just saying, like, oh yeah, I was an E5, and the other guy's, I was an E8. And then automatically when he said that, his brain turned on to, I have authority. Even though in the situation, he did not have authority. He was being in. So think about your own life. Where can things like that mess you up?
Yeah. That's weird. That's very strange. I understand it. I can see how that could happen, but that's very...
We do it all the time. I mean, think about if you're in school with somebody and you're like, oh man, this person's so smart. They're really great. And then you find out, like, oh, this person gets straight D's.
Yeah. Or not even smart. Like maybe they're just popular, you know?
Yep.
And you follow them. Not good.
Yep. All right. Bias number 24. And then we have one more after this, two more after this, and we're all done. This is called the twaddle tendency. The twaddle tendency is very basic. It basically means we spend, as human beings, too much time on nonsense. We spend too much time on Facebook, too much time reading the news, refreshing the news, checking our emails, and refreshing over and over again. And we're basically doing absolutely nothing with our hours. And the reason we do this, again, it comes down to conservation of energy. It is much harder to do anything than it is to do nothing.
It's true.
So if you're someone listening to this and saying, oh, that's not me, I dare you to go into your phone, go to your settings, and look at how much screen time you do. On average, it's 8 hours a day that people are on screen time, which is disgusting.
Crazy.
So we all have this tendency. So be aware that of how much time you are spending doing things that are not productive. And unfortunately, many people think that they are being productive. Oh, I'm just watching these shorts because I'm doing market research. I'm just watching these shorts so I can be part of the thing. I'm refreshing the news and constantly seeing breaking news so I can be an informed citizen. But at the end of the day, none of that really matters, because you're not going to change the world until you change yourself.
Yep.
And if you're not focusing that 8 hours a day, looking at screens, trying to be upset about the way the world is, you're not going to make any changes where you could put that 8 hours, instead of comparing yourself to others, put that 8 hours of energy into making yourself better.
It's true. It's very true. I like it.
So bias number 24, this is the reason respecting tendency. And this one's kind of funny in that we will often allow people to do things just because they said the word because. And let me give you an example. There was basically, we're looking for reasons to allow someone to do something. So they did this experiment where people got in line for a copying machine, and then someone would come to the copying machine and say, can I cut in front of you? And the person would say, no, I'm not going to let you cut in front of me. Go to the back of the line. And then people would come and say, can I cut in front of you? Because I only have 5 papers and I'm 5 minutes late. 80% of the time, they would let them cut them. Eventually, they even tried saying, can I cut in front of you because I have copies to make? which obviously if you're inside the line for a copy maker, of course you're in the line. But since we offered that word because, that gives pretty much full example to do things. And they've also done this experiment. This is one of my favorite ones. But they did it inside of on people jumping in front of lines for people to get onto a bus. And then people would say, "Can I cut in front of you to get on the bus?" People would say no. When they say, "Can I cut in front of you because my bus leaves in 5 minutes?" 100 people would say yes. People would also say, "Can I cut in front of you right now because I'm a better person than you?" And people would still say yes, almost to the same amount of level as that. And we can think about this from ourselves. If you're going through TSA, and I do this all the time, you're going through TSA, you're in line, it sucks. Someone comes up to you and says, "Can I cut you in line?" No, you definitely can't. "But can I cut you in line? I'm so sorry my last flight got delayed on 5 minutes. My flight leaves in 5 minutes." Everyone goes, 100%, man. Just you do you. We all want to have an answer. And if we have a clean cut, simple line and someone provides a reason that's valid, most of the time we're willing to subjugate ourselves and say, yes, you can do what you want to do.
It's crazy.
So we can test this in listen to the Fi Guys. Listen to the Fi Guys because we're going to help you become financially independent. 2 statements. One sounds far more convincing than the other. Both things go towards the same exact result.
Dude, that is, we need to start using that. Why haven't we been using that? That's great. Give us a like because you're a good person, and make sure to subscribe because you are on the path to financial independence. Kind of solid.
Yep. Or you can even do it even better. Listen to the Fi Guys because everyone else does. Which brings me to bias number 25. This is called the Lollapalooza tendency. And the Lollapalooza tendency is if we take several of these cognitive biases and we work them together in order to create something that's going to basically kick most people's ass. Because unfortunately, you would think that, like, oh, if I combine 2 of these biases, then it's only going to be double the power. But actually, they grow exponentially. So if I can use 2 of these, it's 4 times as powerful. If I use 3 of these, it's 9 times as powerful in getting people to agree to things without them even realizing it's happening. So you need to be wary of how this works out in your brain, that most times someone isn't just using one of these biases on you. If you watch like a modern day commercial, they're using 6, 7, 4 or 5 of these biases all at the same time to get you to click. And the average person, this was back in like the early 2000s, saw 5,000 ads a day. I'm sure it's substantially higher now. And every single one of those is acting on your cognitive biases. So you need to be aware of those things. I'm not saying all of them are good advertisements, or we'd be like lost in the sea of nothingness. But the ones that are really good at this are able to use a bunch of these psychological tendencies in order to get you to act the way that they want you to act.
Yeah, you'd become.
And I'll take it to another dark place on this one. Oftentimes, do you know anything about like how cults work?
A little
like
bit.
A
yeah.
cult of,
trying to create one, but yeah.
So the way that cults work is they use all of these 25 biases to get you to slowly build up into it. And they use various ones. They use combinations over time so that someone is kind of like that pot or that frog in boiling water. They turn up the heat slowly enough in order for you to not even realize that you're cooking. And from someone outside looking in, you're like, it's so clear you're in a cult. Like, you need to get out of that cult. But for the person who's in it, they've had years or months or however long of cognitive biases all building onto them. And we've talked about 25 different biases, and you can see that each one of them are powerful. Imagine all of them combined together over time.
That's demolished. Yeah, I could see how that could be very persuasive and very hard to get out of. And easy to get sucked into as well.
Detrimental. And again, the reason I bring all these up isn't just because people are using this on you. Marketing teams are using every one of these on you, but also you're using these on yourself. The worst person you can trick in your life is yourself. And the person who you're best at tricking at is yourself. You have a little lawyer in your brain who knows every single argument, every single reason that you're going to react to perfectly. And they know all these biases too. So sometimes you have to take out, we have two different brains, a think and a slow. And most of us, we go through life going with our fast brain. Whatever our first inclination is, that must be right. But the slow brain, their frontal lobe, that's a thing that often is right. Because most people, they go through life with that fast thinking brain, and that'll keep you alive right now. But that slow thinking brain is what's going to keep you alive on the long term. And we need to find a balance between these two. But most people don't have that balance. Most people go through life just thinking fast. And if you're that person, these biases are going to be detrimental on your life. So hopefully you're able to realize them, recognize them in other people, and more importantly, recognize them in yourself. Which brings me to this week's action step. A lot of the research I did for this podcast comes from my background in psychology, but I also reread the book Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. So I would definitely recommend that. And if you guys want, please leave a comment and tell me that you guys would want me to do a review on that book, because it's a lot of these biases, they're broken down into the strongest ones, the ones that have the most influence on human beings. I think it's like 6 or 7 of the strongest ones that we can definitely talk about. But go to your local library, grab it on Audible, grab it on Amazon, whatever it is. The book, again, is Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. This book was so powerful that after Charlie Munger read this book, he actually awarded Robert Cialdini Berkshire Hathaway A share, because he said that his book changed his life. And at the time, a Berkshire Hathaway A share was worth like $260,000.
That's wild. Well, I think with that being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Like the video if you enjoyed it and you're a good person, and subscribe because I know that you want to become financially independent as we do. And I hope to see you in next week.
And so many other people do too. That's the reason you really want to do it, because everyone else is also subscribing and leaving a comment.
Exactly.
You should do
so
it. So
tune in next week, just like the other people.
Because
tune in next week because everybody else is tuning in next week, and we'd hate to miss you. You're part of our 5 family now, so we expect to see you there at 5 Friday episode. And I'm gonna stop with the manipulation techniques, but hopefully, if you were paying attention, you recognized which ones we were doing today. If not, you may have to reread it, but I know you will, or re-listen to the podcast, and I know you will, because you're a great and you're a wonderful person. But with that being said, I hope to see you on Friday. Have a great week, and till then, later, guys.
This video podcast is sponsored by Monzon Wealth. The content in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. We do not endorse specific products or services. Past performance does not guarantee future results. The opinions expressed are those of the hosts and guests, not the podcast sponsor. It is crucial to consult with a qualified financial advisor or professional who can provide advice tailored to your specific needs before making any financial decisions, investments, or taking any other actions. If you are seeking specified help, you can reach out to Chris at monzonwealth.com.